My name is Tim Nielsen. I'm a sound designer. I've been doing this for about 25 plus years now. And, one of my main jobs is to create sounds that don't exist in the world. And to do that, I'm willing to cheat in any way I have to. For example, in Jurassic, most of those vocals are actually not animal sourced. It doesn't even matter what they are. They might be cars or trees in the wind or anything. But also, I use my own voice a lot in creature design, actually. And I can play you some examples of some things like that. And honestly, the reality is, whatever I need to do is fair game to sort of make it work.
Creature sound design is one of those things we don't quite pay enough attention to. We sort of just take it for granted, while in reality, if it is anything less than perfect, you'll notice. Roar! Just think about it. Aliens, dragons, monsters, a girl finding me attractive, all things that don't exist. But just like dinosaurs, for example, the film industry has done such a great job at creating those sounds that we all just collectively accepted it. Like, yeah, that is exactly what T-Rex sounds like. And it got me thinking, it is actually someone's job to figure it out. Not only what something should sound like, but how to achieve that sound. And one of those people is Tim Nielsen, an award-winning sound designer with decades of experience working on pretty much every major franchise there is, including Jurassic World, who was kind enough to talk to me and share some of his secrets. And as it turns out, there are three main parts of the process, starting with identifying the sound.
When we start, we're working only with concept art usually. We haven't seen any of the animation yet. Certainly nothing is finished at that point. And so usually the director and I will spot, we'll go through concept art. He'll talk about what he thinks these things might sound like, or we talk a lot in emotions, honestly. So this dinosaur has to be terrifying. This one is cute. This one is, going to be high pitched. This one's going to be low pitched. And in my head, I start to hear ideas. For example, in the new Jurassic, there's a dinosaur called the Quetzalcoatlus, which is the largest of the pterosaur birds. And when we started to see the concept art coming in for that and the animation, the throat would do these really interesting throbbing things. And so we immediately started to think of weird little guttural sounds and things like that. Or the D-Rex, is this massive dinosaur and it's slobbers and it's got wet all around its face. And so I immediately started to think of, well, I want this one to be kind of gross sounding, and I want it to sound like it's somewhat wrong inside. It's kind of a genetic experiment sort of gone wrong, kind of that, internally, maybe it's just not correct, and the nasal is all weird, and so it can make a lot of really slobbery kind of wet sounds. And so my brain starts to build a list of all the problems we're going to have to solve, and then, then we start diving into the real work.
And that is the trickiest part of the process, to source the exact sound that you need, while at the same time not being entirely sure how to get there. So with Jurassic World in mind, I was really curious about how he specifically created some of the dinosaur sounds.
We start with animal sources usually, because animal sources sound natural. I mean, dinosaur is an animal. It has to have certain animalistic qualities to it. And so one of the big parts of my job is to gather a huge library of sounds. And I do that by recording a lot myself, trading with other sound designers, purchasing sounds. And in my sound library, I have somewhere around 1.9 million sound effects available to me. And sometimes I send people recorders to record themselves. For John Carter, we needed to record these baby bears. They're very hard to find. I found a woman in Tennessee who rescued baby bears from the wild, and then she released them back. And she wouldn't let me come record because they don't want people around these bears. They're going to try to let them loose. So I sent her a little recorder and some instructions, and she sent me 5 hours of baby bear recordings. And here's some. And so, it's just the most amazing recordings that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So one sound for Jurassic I can play you, the Quetzalcoatlus. One of the interesting things I came across there were some recordings of an alpaca. And they have this weird trilling sound to their voice. And that became a big component of the sounds for the Quetzalcoatlus, because the same thing, it was doing this thing with its throat. And these sounds just really, especially when I pitched them down a little bit, I can show you maybe. Let's see. But for example, in Jurassic, the Mutodon, most of those vocals are actually not animal sourced. Most of their vocals actually came from scraping along cardboard with sort of a knife and then taking an oven mitt, like a rubber oven mitt, and just dragging it along the countertop made these great screeches. But it's pretty rare that one sound will become just the sound of the dinosaur on its own. I'm almost always layering sounds. I would say most creatures are made up of between 4 and 6 different sources of sound, different animals that are then blended together. And so there's a scene in Jurassic where they come across the T-Rex and it's sleeping and it's basically snoring. And that was something that was completely unique to this movie. We'd never had a snoring T-Rex before in any of the movies, so this had to be something that I had to sort of figure out. And it was one of the hardest things. And that is probably made up of 25 to 30 different sound elements layering and combining and mixing and together just to get to that sound. And it was probably the hardest thing in all of the creatures in Jurassic to make that. In particular, when it rolls over and it does this big, huge yawn. That was probably 15 to 20 pieces layered together just to make that work. And so it can get really complicated. I try not to let it get that complicated because what can often happen is when you layer that many sounds together, you lose definition and it becomes kind of noisy and you can't really get articulation. So we try to use as few as we need to accomplish the job that we're doing. But also, I use my own voice a lot in creature design, actually, to make them sound bigger and deeper. So my own little weird sounds, because what I usually find is when I'm almost done with a creature, there's still something missing, and it's something that I can't find in an animal source. It's something about the performance that I need, either a growl or a snarl or some part of that sound. Sometimes just weird slobbery sounds, and I can add that in myself because I can actually perform that now as the kind of missing piece. So I would say it's 80% animalistic sounds, 10% me, 10% props and other weird recordings and things like that.
Wow. You're talented on a whole new level.
Well, no, and it's kind of embarrassing when I have to do these things because I just go into a room where nobody can see me and I just strain my voice and do weird things and it looks really stupid. And but it's been very useful to sort of perform some of those elements yourself.
Speaking of which, that is the next step in the process, to perform or perhaps adjust the sound to perfectly fit the visuals, because it's allowing the creatures to act, to express emotions. And if you think about it, it's almost a form of dialogue.
Sometimes you get a great animal recording, but it might be very similar. You don't get a lot of emotional variation. When we can perform sounds with props or different things, I can do big ones and small ones and loud ones and short ones and long ones. And I can really use that to my advantage to build up a wide palette of performances. But if we just cut big screeches through every single thing, it kind of gets boring and you risk sort of fatiguing the audience. They get tired of those really loud sounds. And so we really need to have a variety through the scene, and it needs to have sounds like it's responding to something, or sometimes it has an attack sound, or sometimes it has a curious sort of thing. And so we sort of map out the emotions of it through the scene of also what's it doing at any given point. Is it attacking them right now? Is it like looking around curiously, not knowing what's going on? Is it responding in pain to being hit? So, it has to have a wide range of emotions, just like a human performance does. And if I do my job right, you're not thinking about the sound. You're just believing it, and you're thinking, that's a cool movie, or that creature sounds cool, or whatever. I enjoy this scene. But if somebody is stopping to think about the sound, then I think I've done my job poorly in a way, right? I mean, my work should kind of disappear into the movie, ideally, which, sometimes I go, God, I wish people noticed how much work that was to make that stupid dinosaur yawning, but that's not my job, right? To call attention to myself. It's my job to make that work in the film, and then people should just believe that that's a dinosaur yawning,
In a way, this whole thing is like painting, but with sound. Adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that until you get just the right color. And I suppose, like any masterwork, the biggest irony of creature sound design is that the better it is, the less likely you are to notice.
And So yeah, I would just be aware of that this is a craft and an art that, is very complicated, but at its core, it's trying to be emotional. It's trying to help tell a story. It's trying to make you scared when you should be scared. It's trying to make you laugh when it should be funny, to make tense when you should be tense. And we're working really hard behind the scenes to make that work, and so that you enjoy the movie that much more.